opposite of this is the sugar diet, the honey diet. So everyone's like, okay, I couldn't do the keto diet. I actually like sugar. This is right up my alley. I don't need fat. I don't like fat. I actually don't even like eating protein. I'm going to just focus on sugar. And this is my diet. And growing up, I mean, I was eating a very low fat diet and high carbs, high sugar, but it wasn't real carbs. It was the processed carbs. And my brain suffered. And, my hormones were off, all the things. I don't think that's what this is. So it is going crazy now. Let's talk about it. What is it? What kind of foods are they focused on? What is the mechanism that's at work? And, you know, does it work short term and then long term falters? Or is this something, Jay, that is actually going to stick around?
Yeah, that one will definitely have to see. We'll have to wait and see. But I think I think at least parts of it will. I think it will in a way. So backing up, I mean, big picture, basically within the kind of diets, and there's a few different ones. There's the sugar diet is really the biggest one, but there's the honey diet and the fruit till noon diet and a couple others that are all based on the same framework that actually came out of the bioenergetic perspective, where we recognize the benefits of carbohydrates and keeping those stress hormones down. But there was people who were looking for maybe quicker weight loss, or they were just doing different experiments, looking at the research, and basically came across seeing research looking at the benefits of potentially low fat diets, and then also looking at low protein diets, and that they can increase the metabolic rate. And basically, the idea being that if we hack those mechanisms, we can lose weight quickly and effectively. So that's kind of the broad picture. And the first thing I want to say is I'm excited to see these things catch on. I think it's been well over a decade at this point, maybe 15 to 25 years of the alternative health space being dominated by high fat, low carb diets. And the idea being that the carbs are the problem. They're causing metabolic syndrome. They're causing obesity and insulin resistance. They're causing heart disease. They are the cause of all of the problems. And so it's exciting to see that narrative start to shift a little bit. And I really hope that catches on and that's here to stay. So that's the first thing. However, as you were getting at, there's some inherent restriction that goes on here, right? We're talking about basically utilizing very low fat and potentially very low protein diets, depending on how they're done. Some of the diets are doing basically no protein until dinner. Some are, involved going for several days of doing like a fast without any protein or fat and doing only sugar-based things during that time, honey and fruits and juices, but also table sugar based things, high fructose corn syrup based things. So, and again, I think there's a really great part about that too, which is recognizing that the table sugar is not the problem. Obviously, we don't want that to be the bulk of our diet. It's not ideal, but that hasn't been the issue. That hasn't been the thing that's been causing these metabolic problems. But so that's kind of the framework for these diets. And on one hand, I think we're seeing them have benefits in terms of weight loss and in terms of people feeling energetic. A lot of the actual effects that people are noticing on these diets are the same ones that we talked about with keto and low carb diets, where initially, especially, people are losing a lot of weight. They're feeling a lot more clear headed. They have better energy. They're noticing, sleep improvements as well. And I would say one of the main reasons for that is the very low fat diets do help to support insulin resistance. And in somebody who is very insulin resistant, dropping the fat down can be beneficial to an extent. There's a point where we start to really incur some stress. And it's also important to note that for somebody who is far less insulin resistant, we wouldn't want to drop the fat as low. And that'll come at a greater cost to our hormonal health and digestive health and blood sugar stability. So there's kind of that cost benefit there to an extent. But anyway, there's support for this supporting insulin resistance. Dropping the fat can help with that. And on the protein side, we actually have a very similar mechanism to low carb. And this was one that I didn't touch on as much. But when we have the initial shift into low carb and even ongoing after that, there's a major increase in stress, like we talked about. And stress can feel good. When we wake up and have a cup of coffee, just a cup of black coffee, we're energetic, our mood is up, we can focus, We can go do a workout. We have a lot of energy. This is why people use things like caffeine for pre-workouts and various other supplements and things like that. It's because the stress helps you feel good. But stress doesn't come for free. There's a crash involved. Sometimes that crash is a couple hours later, or sometimes it's months or years later if we're really chronically dealing with that stress. And so that's what we saw in the low carb diets. And there's a major aspect of that here on these high carb, low protein, and low fat diets. When we drop the protein as low as they're talking about here, it activates a hormone called FGF21, which is kind of unique to protein deficiency. There's It's kind of like its own system that responds to protein deficiency, and it says basically we don't have enough protein and amino acids coming in. We have to stop building protein. We have to stop using amino acids to build more proteins, and we have to eat more to get more protein in. So what it actually does is it increases our desire to consume protein, understandably so, and it increases our metabolic rate so we can burn off the extra other fuel we have and we can go out and get more protein and eat more because we're eating a protein deficient diet. So it's a pretty unique hormone in that way. But in the way that it upregulates our metabolism to burn off the extra fuel, that is mediated by stress. It's causing the same type of stress that we're seeing on these low carb diets, where yes, in the short term, you might see an increase in the metabolic rate, and that might cause some weight loss. But in the long term, we're depleting the energy that our bodies need, that we need to have available for all of our functions, and we will turn down our metabolic rate in the long term. And that's what we see with long-term effects of elevated FGF21 and low protein diets in the research.
Can I
So,
stop you real
yeah,
quick
yeah,
there?
of
And
course.
because this is so confusing. So, if this is stopping that protein synthesis, your body's going to start eating away at its muscles, I would assume. And when you say weight loss, you're not saying fat loss. So, you're losing muscle and fat at the same time. Would that be correct?
Potentially, yes. And that's one of the biggest concerns. And it's not just muscle, but also bone, because FGF21, as that increases, it actually tends to lead to bone loss and muscle loss. So that is one of the biggest concerns here is we're not just going to be losing body fat, but we'll also be losing that lean mass. Now, when we're eating a lot of carbs, we're not doing a full fast, but we're eating lots of carbohydrates, that will reduce the amount of muscle loss because we aren't converting those amino acids to glucose. We're not breaking down the muscle just to produce
Right.
glucose. So there's less breakdown going on there, which is great. But there's less, we still don't have the protein needed for just the regular turnover in the muscles, right? And it's not just the muscles, it's every organ in our body is built on mostly protein and fat as well. And so when we are in this state, we're preventing our capacity to properly repair the normal breakdown, like the normal usage of all of our organs and including our muscles. So if we're on a chronically low protein diet, we're much more prone to losing muscle mass and bone mass. Now, some of these diets do include some versions of like protein refeeding, or the idea being that with dinner, you're going to eat more protein. And so there you could start to rebuild some of your muscle. And that definitely is happening to some extent, but we're basically putting ourselves in the negative and then just trying to get back to balance and hoping that we do. We don't know that we're actually going to get back to that balance. We're just hoping that that's the case and there's not going to be a net loss over time, like the research shows. But on top of that, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to build into the positive, right? We want to be able to build and regenerate and improve our complexity. We don't want to constantly be breaking ourselves down and just getting back up, hopefully, to where we were and not even knowing if we're really doing that, because we know the long-term effects of things like intermittent fasting, even when we're having protein, during that 8-hour window, but we're fasting for 16 hours, that shows increased loss of muscle mass.
Right.
So we're probably not going to be able to rebuild all the way and actually get all the way back up, especially when we're doing this long term. So for someone, just sorry, just real quick, for someone who's like maybe obese or dealing with type 2 diabetes, I think you're probably going to be losing a very large portion of body fat. And I wouldn't be as concerned about a small amount of lean mass loss. And there's a lot of carbs coming in that should mitigate that. But if that's not us, then I would especially be worried. I would especially be concerned about losing muscle mass and bone mass.
Well, it reminds me of the intermittent fasting or OMAD, where people say, well, it doesn't matter when I eat my protein, as long as I get it in during that day. It doesn't have to be right after my workout. But the problem is if you're having one meal a day with protein, whether it's fasting or eating sugar up until that point, how are you able to eat as much protein as you need to sustain you in one meal? I mean, for the typical man, that's 150 to 200 grams of protein in one meal. That's a lot of protein. And
Mhm.
can your body process it? And for women, I mean, most listeners are women in perimenopause and menopause, and we are having a tough enough time already to maintain muscle mass and let alone build muscle mass during these hormonal changes. So it makes me a bit concerned about the long-term effects of that, rebuilding our tissues. And it's not just muscle, it's the hair, it's the skin. I mean, us women, we're plumping Botox and fillers in. Why don't we just eat the protein to help with collagen and the elastin of our skin? And we're losing hair because our thyroid's plummeting, and this can't be good for the thyroid mechanisms, just like any extreme diet. So maybe you can talk a little bit about long term. Are we seeing, or maybe we don't even know yet, what the impact is on our thyroid hormones?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and when we're looking long term at the effects of protein deficiency and of severely low fat diets, we do see negative effects to the reproductive health. In the studies on rodents, they see infertility, and in terms of and then they also see loss of muscle mass and those kinds of concerns as well. And we do see pretty ubiquitously, like comprehensively throughout the research, that very low fat diets tend to lead to lower testosterone, lower dihydrotestosterone or DHT. So we do see the signs that thyroid is going to be decreasing. I haven't seen research actually specifically pointing to that, but we're activating the same mechanisms that typically lower thyroid hormone, which is the sympathetic nervous system, that stress system. That's what turns down thyroid hormone production and conversion. So I would expect to see those things with time. And we do also see, I should say, in the research, decreased metabolic rate. So initially it increases, there's this bump in energy expenditure, which for us could be months. You might not notice it, just like with fasting or low carb, this might go fine for months or even longer. But then after that, we do see the opposite. We see that metabolic rate go down, which again is mediated by thyroid, among other things.
Wouldn't it go along with acute stress versus chronic stress? I mean, if someone goes through a divorce or has a death in the family, it's very common to lose weight short term, but then they start gaining the weight because of the chronic stress and the stress hormones that are staying elevated long term. It sounds like it would follow the same pattern because you're giving that initial acute stress, and then long term it's like, hey, wait a second, we're in this new reality where I'm only getting these macronutrients and I've got to shut things down for survival mode. So it just seems like they all follow the same pattern.
Yeah. And it comes back to where we started, right? Low calorie dieting and over exercising will do the same thing. We
Yeah.
see the weight loss, and then all of a sudden we were maintaining our weight, let's say on 2,500 calories before. Then we went into this big deficit to lose body fat. And then now we try to go back up to the 2,500 and we'd be gaining a lot of weight. We can only maintain on 2,000 calories or 2,200. And then that keeps going down with time and our weight keeps going up despite that. So
Right.
we're left in that same result, in the long term.
Okay, so Jay,